So a couple books I finished this month that I'm not going to talk about is I read the first 6 volumes of Asadora, and that is by Naoki Urasawa, who also wrote Monster. And then I also read a volume of Catch These Hands. That was volume 3. Volume 4 will be coming out soon, and that will complete the series. And the main reason I'm not going to talk about these on this video is because I am going to start a manga spotlight video series, and so they will be talked about in that series. But I will go ahead and talk about all my other books for December. So I finished the webtoon first season of Darby, and that was a ride. Darby is a little bloodthirsty T-Rex, or at least I keep calling him a T-Rex. He is some sort of baby carnivorous dinosaur. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to call him T-Rex. And he gets into all sorts of scrapes, is constantly covered in blood. He runs around with his brother and 3 sisters, and he also runs into, obviously, different types of dinosaurs. Parts of this are just pretty much, kind of the crazy, gory fun. Other parts are actually pretty deep, such as the ending of the first season and the probably about 15 or so chapters leading up to that. One nice thing is this is not a daily pass webtoon yet, so you can read as many as you want in a day. You don't have to wait to unlock more episodes or anything like that. So yeah, if it sounds like something that you would enjoy, as long as you don't mind a lot of really fucked up craziness and a lot of gore, a lot of cussing, go for it. The second webtoon I finished this month was called The Wolf in Red Riding Hood. This is by the same author who is currently writing Act Like You Love Me. And The Wolf in Red Riding Hood is 64 episodes and complete. Unfortunately, it is daily pass after episode 16. However, I did read it and read a chapter every day once I got to that point. It was fun. I will say it took a few chapters to get going. Probably about the time, the daily pass starts is when it started to really pick up the pace. But it follows Anna, Jay, and then we introduce Sheena about a third of the way through. And Anna finds out that in her family they are cursed to be a werewolf, and this kind of follows her turning into a werewolf and the misadventures she has. And there's a whole legend about her family, and her ancestor was the werewolf and the werewolf's lover, and you find out a lot about that in the last third. And then the ending I thought was pretty funny, and it did definitely leave it open for a season 2. However, the fact that this was completed in 2020 and the author has now gone on to another series, I don't think it will continue. But if you like kind of like the funny fantasy romantic school drama stories, I would say definitely give this look. And being that it's on webtoons and it's all daily pass, it is all free, so no harm, no foul there to try out a couple chapters. And like I said, I did really enjoy it myself and thought it was funny. And the art style is relatively nice. It's nice and simple and easy to follow, and the expressions are well done as well. And just overall, I do recommend it if you're into webtoons as well. So I finished the webtoon Scroll If You Dare, and this is 27 or 28 chapters. Each one is basically a short horror story. They're each written and illustrated by a different person. They were all pretty good. There was a couple that were predictable, but it was still, if you like horror, you would like them. And it was just a pretty simple, jump scares for the most part. I have to say, I did enjoy probably the first 5 the most, and then after that they were still good, but it was also kind of like, I want something different rather than just the jump scares. One nice thing is they're all released. None of them are daily pass where, you can only read 1 chapter a day or you need coins. So I did enjoy that. And if you like horror, if you like webtoons, I would say you'd probably enjoy this. This month I did several buddy reads of the DC Inc. graphic novels. These are graphic novels for young adult. And I also read a few, one at least, of the Zoom, which is middle grade. And so the 2 YAs were Harley Quinn Breaking Glass, Poison Ivy Thorns, and then for the middle grade it was My Buddy Killer Croc. So to start with, we have Harley Quinn Breaking Glass. That was the first one I read. And I felt like it was okay. I did like the art, but I did not care for the fact that it was mostly black and white with just a little bit of color. I felt like the particular art style would have been better in a lot of color. Harley was also rather childish, and I know in some itinerations she can be, but I just felt like this one took it way too far. She's supposed to be 15, and she seems to be more like 10 or 11. And so yeah, it wasn't the best, but I've probably read worse Harley comics. And they're, like, one of the things I immediately question is the main thing that sets this in motion is her mother goes to work on a cruise ship and so sends her to stay with her grandmother. Well, unfortunately, her grandmother has passed away, and somehow her mother doesn't even know this. Like, my first thought was, how do you send a 15-year-old to somebody without calling them and seeing if it's okay? I mean, for all she knows, the grandmother could have went on a vacation, could have went on a cruise herself. And then where would Harley have been? And I feel like this part really wasn't addressed in the narrative. And then another thing is it seemed like there are so many issues just kind of shoehorned in, it felt like. There is a film club, and they're only showing films by white men, and so Poison Ivy is trying to get them to show films that are directed by women, and in order to do this, she starts protesting, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but when the school intervenes, the current president says, look, we told her, submit a list, we will go through it, and if we agree with these films, we'll show them. I did like at the end, she went ahead and ran for film club president. I feel like it would have been much better if that's how she had started, or if she had at least submitted that list to start with, and they were just all denied, and there wasn't really a good reason giving. Then a lot of people are getting evicted, and again, this is all touched on rather topically, so yeah, I feel like it could have been so much better. But again, it was about Harley, So I did decide to read it. And I did have fun buddy reading it. Like, that's part of buddy reading, is you can get everybody else's, opinions as well. And I would say if you are either like a completionist like I am and want to read every Harley Quinn that's out there or every DCYA, I'd say kind of put this one towards the end because it's definitely not the greatest. The second YA graphic novel I read, and this was also a buddy read, was Poison Ivy Thorns. And that one I actually really enjoyed. For one thing, even though the color palette was muted, it was still full color, so I did enjoy that aspect of it more. It also went down a little darker of a path than Harley Breaking Glass, and as I've mentioned before, I kind of enjoy the darker stories. It was rather interesting to see this was the first graphic novel in this imprint that I read in which a character I'm sorry, I can't talk tonight, had superpowers within the canon. And I thought it was rather interesting how they developed those powers and how she came about them. And this one was very much a story of abusive parents and the abuse of power, but I felt like this was a lot more subtly done. It was very well woven into the plot and didn't feel tacked on. And I'd definitely be interested to read more about this version of Poison Ivy. And I like how they kept her very true to her character. She has the people that she really cares about, and of course her plants, and it just felt very well done. And so this was probably my favorite that I've read so far. The middle grade graphic novel, My Buddy Killer Croc, was actually pretty good as well. It wasn't as good as Thorns, but I did enjoy it, and especially with it being middle grade, I didn't go into it expecting quite as deep of a story, but it actually wound up being pretty good. And it follows Adam, who is a huge fan of Killer Croc when he was a wrestler, and when he eventually meets him, he does learn some things from him. Not all good. Killer Croc does convince him to steal for him. He convinces him to finally let him into a party, and he then proceeds to steal stuff. And Adam is obviously very upset by this. He never meant for this to happen. And another thing is, he also has a very visible scar on his face, and I think that's a lot of why he connects with Killer Croc, because people make fun of him for his scar, and then Killer Croc, of course, looking like a crocodile, people will make fun of him. The art style was not my favorite. I can see where definitely people would like it. It's very, very cartoonish and simple. I did love the colors, so it used very bright and vibrant colors. And one design ideal that I did like was Killer Croc's absolutely ridiculous tail. Like, I don't know why I liked that so much, but the fact that he had this really, really long tail, I just really liked that. And I would say for a middle grade, this was a good graphic novel, and I do feel like it did bring up some important points about, trust and bullying, and it brought them up in a way that was easy to understand. So if you like middle grade, want to get your middle grade reader into some different books, this would probably be a good book to start with. I finally read Six Crimson Cranes this month. I know I've only been talking about it, since I restarted my channel this year in like August. But I did finally get to it, and I enjoyed it. I did like the fact that Elizabeth Lim connected it to her Unravel the Dusk and Spin the Dawn duology. It's still in the same world, even though it's set earlier, because in Spin the Dawn, they actually say that she has become a legend, Princess Shiori. Now, this is a fairy tale retelling. It is a retelling of the Wild Swans, and obviously, since it's Asian inspired, it's a different bird than swans. It's cranes, hence the title, Six Crimson Cranes. But it continues with the six brothers and the youngest sibling being their only sister. It also deals with the demons that were mentioned in the Unravel the Dusk, Spin the Dawn. And yeah, again, I quite liked that connection. I did feel like the writing in Six Crimson Cranes was much better than that in Spin the Dawn. My main complaint is I did feel like the middle was rather slow, but then once we get back to the part where Shiori meets up with her brothers, it does go a lot faster. And another thing I enjoyed was that not all the characters were entirely what you expected. I feel like they all had depth and they all had growth, and I really do enjoy that. And so next month I'm going to read the second and final book, which is The Dragon's Promise, and it sounds to me like that one will have a lot more magic than this one did, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. I finished Sayaka Murata's last book that was translated into English, and that is Life Ceremony, which is a collection of short stories, and she's apparently more famous in Japan for her short stories than her novels. So this collection has first-rate material, A Magnificent Spread, A Summer Night's Kiss, Two's Family, The Time of the Large Star, Poochie, Life Ceremony, Body Magic, Lover on the Breeze, Puzzle, Eating the City, and Hatchling. So a first-rate material and Life Ceremony are both about what is taboo and what isn't, and how those change over time. I thought a first-rate material was not quite as creepy in certain aspects. As you get further in, you do realize it gets a lot creepier. And then Life Ceremony was just overall creepy. Yeah. Then we have A Magnificent Spread and Eating the City, which are both about taboos regarding food and what people think of as normal food and abnormal food. And this is more of a safer stories, I would say, surrounding the taboos. There are more taboos that some people do break nowadays, and it quite honestly doesn't go into cannibalism like Life Ceremony does, and it doesn't go into as much macabre as a first-rate material does. Then we have A Summer Night's Kiss and Two's Family, which are alternate stories about the same two women and different ways their lives could have gone. And this one also kind of goes along with the taboos regarding relationships, having children, and such, and what is actually considered a family, especially in Two's Family. Then The Time of the Large Star and Poochie were both very short and rather strange. I did still enjoy them. The Time of the Large Star was pretty good. Poochie was good, but it was a little bit disturbing, and I did kind of want to know more about it. Like, is this something that was common? Was Poochie always Poochie, or what exactly happened there? Then we have Body Magic, which is an alternate, shorter story in the vein of Earthlings, and the major plot points are all there, but a lot of the kind of creepiness was played down, in my opinion. Lover on the Breeze was another one that was rather strange, and one that I'd like to know a little more about. Puzzle was, again, had a similar theme to Earthlings in, somebody who felt apart and different from the rest of the world and how that affected their interactions. Then Hatchling was also reminiscent on Earthlings in the sense of how do you act around other people, and dealt with, the fact that when you have multiple groups of people, that you can kind of play a different role in each, and it did take that a little further, but I thought that was a really good one. Out of this, I would say Hatchling and Life Ceremony were probably my two favorites, and then A First Rate Material was really good, and so was Two's Family. The other ones were still good, but those four really stood out to me. And I do know Sayaka Murata has a lot of other short stories, so I do hope those will all eventually get translated. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading more as they come out. I finished Heir to the Sky, and this is a story about 3 floating islands and the people who live on them to escape the monster-ridden earth below. And this is classified as YA. However, reading it, I'd say it's almost more upper middle grade to young YA. The characters and the world could have used a little more depth. I did still enjoy it, but I was very aware while I was reading it that it was YA. I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of danger despite all the monsters, and I did feel like quite a bit of it was very predictable, and it does dive into some moral grayness, but it's very light, and it's kind of resolved pretty quickly in a rather brutal way, in my opinion. And it did remind me of the Interment Chronicles, just because of the floating island above the earth, and then there being people who had fallen, and there being a barrier so that they would either get pushed back or when they fell would survive. And obviously there were some differences, like the earth below was different, and the understanding was different. I did kind of like the mythology. I really would have liked to learn more. Like, one of the things that really stuck out to me was there were quite a few fantasy slash sci-fi elements in here that basically said this is a different planet. I would have loved to have delved more into that. Like, there's 2 moons, there's fireflies in every color of the rainbow, and obviously that's something more so than just the monsters that scream this is another world, not just Earth in the future. However, I do believe, it's pretty enjoyable, and I believe definitely those who are in the intended age, like young adults who are still probably in high school, maybe even middle school, would enjoy it. And I did enjoy it regardless. But like I said, that's just because I kind of accepted that it was leaning into being YA. So definitely check it out if you're into YAs. I read How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories this month. Obviously, I also read The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. However, that's in a whole separate video that's just about them. And so then this finished up what is released of the Folk of the Air / Elfhame series so far. And I did kind of enjoy this. The illustrations were quite nice. And it had, very short chapters. It was a very short book, less than 200 pages. And I read it very quickly, as I read the whole series very quickly. I don't think I mentioned this in my other video, but The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King, I both read in one night. Then The Queen of Nothing, I read over the course of about 3 or 4 days. However, I read most of it in one night because I did start it while I was at work. And so then this, like I said, this book finished up the series for right now, and it basically retells some different points from the series from Cardan's point of view. It also dives into his childhood, and you also kind of get the overarching story that ties all of these little bits together. And this is after The Queen of Nothing, when Cardan and Jude come back to Earth to try to stop a fairy creature. And one thing I did like was they had the same story in there that was told 3 different ways with 3 different morals. And I thought that was kind of cool to see how the story evolved over time to fit how the characters changed and, quite honestly, what they needed the story for. And I'm quite looking forward to The Stolen Heir when it comes out next year. I'm not sure when I will get to it next year, but I do plan to read it the year it comes out. However, I might hold off if I hear that the second book, and the second and final book, I should say, in that duology comes out like early 2024, then I might just go ahead and read both of those at once. Because, I kind of like to do that, obviously. Just read through a whole series without a break. Because then I feel like I remember things better, and I pick up on little nuances better. And, this is everything I've read this month. And since today is the 30th, I do not believe I will actually finish anything more. So I hope you all had a wonderful 2022, and I hope your 2023 is wonderful as well. And I will see you back in the book cave sometime in January.